Hello, my name is Rebekah Windschitl, and I'm a youth and family therapist with Youth Service Bureau. And today I'm going to be talking about suicide awareness and prevention. But first, a little bit about YSB. Youth Service Bureau is a nonprofit organization that focuses on helping families learn the skills they need to be more successful at home, in school, and throughout their communities. We have several different programs. One of our programs is youth family focused counseling. So that's what I do. I'm a mental health therapist. And we do counseling with youth and their families ages roughly 4 to about 25 years old. We also have diversion services, which is when kids get into trouble with the law, or maybe they're just having a lot of troubles at home with behaviors. They come to us for different classes that they can take in order to deal with some of those situations. We have a youth and family education program. That is what this is. It's presentations and education out in the community. And in our school districts, in District 833, 834 and 622, we have chemical health support in the middle schools and in the high schools. So we have 3 different locations. We have Cottage Grove, Stillwater, and Woodbury, and I'm a therapist in the Stillwater and Woodbury offices. So just to talk a little bit about statistics, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. The highest rate of suicide is actually among middle-aged white males. It's a rate of 20 per 100,000 people, and men typically die 3 times more often than women, and this was a 2018 statistic. Firearms accounted for more than 50% of the suicide deaths in 2018, and the young adults and adolescents accounted for a rate of 14 out of 100,000 deaths by suicide in 2018. On average, there's about 123 deaths by suicide a day in the US. So those are just some of the statistics to help give you a framework about what we're talking about today. So one important thing about suicide is the purpose of suicide is not to die. It's not to die. The purpose of suicide is to end the pain. If you talk to a person who is thinking about suicide, if you ask them if you could get rid of your pain and still be alive, most of the time they say yes. They do say yes. That's something that they want. They want the end of their pain, but they think that death is the only way that they can achieve that. So the purpose of suicide is not to die. The purpose of suicide is to end the pain that they are in. So there's quite a few myths, but we're just going to go over a few of them today. Depression is the only cause of suicide. And this is a myth. Suicide has many factors that cause it. It's multifactorial. And not all people who struggle with depression are suicidal either. There's many people who struggle with depression who do not have suicidal thoughts. So just because someone is depressed does not mean that that's where they're at, is suicide. But depression is not the only cause of suicide. It's considered dangerous to ask someone if they're considering suicide. This is also a myth. People struggling with suicidal thoughts actually might want to talk about it with someone. You're not going to cause the person to attempt death by suicide just by talking about it. I talk to people about suicide all the time. It's a way that we heal. So talking to someone about suicide is not going to lead them to make an attempt. Someone who is suicidal is determined to die. This is also a myth. Suicidal people are actually quite ambivalent about living or dying. Really, they're in a state of crisis in the moment, and having the right type of support in that moment can really make a difference in preventing that suicide. And it's easy to spot someone who's thinking about suicide. This is also a myth, because people often the times, what happens when you struggle with depression or you struggle with really significant mental health issues like suicide is you put on a mask. You pretend that everything is hunky-dory and everything is okay. And so it's not always easy to spot someone who is having suicidal thoughts, which is why it's important to know the signs that someone's struggling and to look out for them in your loved ones. So some of those signs, there's direct warning signs of suicide and there's some indirect ones. Direct warning signs are ones that are threatening to hurt or kill themselves. You notice they're looking for ways to kill themselves. When you're talking or writing about death, dying, suicide, and significant self-destructive behavior significant drug misuse, maybe carelessly handling weapons, those types of things. Those are direct warning signs. Those are very obvious ones that this person's safety is in danger. Some indirect warning signs for suicidality are significant substance use, that feeling of hopelessness or purposelessness, maybe anger and rage outbursts, seeking of revenge, risky behaviors, increase in risky behaviors, maybe a social withdrawal. We hear the reports of somebody who's feeling like they're trapped and they can't get out. Increase in anxiety, maybe dramatic changes in mood. Giving away of personal possessions, personal items that are important to them. And feelings of guilt or shame, self-blame, remorse. So those are indirect. Those are things that might be going on inside a person or might show mildly outside that are indirect warning signs that something's up, something's going on that you want to be tuned into. But those kinds of symptoms all on their own, you don't necessarily automatically think suicide, which is why it's good to know what they are and to be aware of them so that when you do notice them, if you notice a couple of these are happening, if you're starting to recognize they're feeling these things, start to put that puzzle together. So there are risk factors. A prior suicide attempt is a risk factor to another suicide attempt. Someone who struggles with mental health conditions is also a risk factor. Experiencing stressful life events, divorce, job loss, death of a loved one, loss of relationships, those different types of stressful events lead to an increase in risk because there's a lot of struggle with coping. And if we don't know how to cope with the pain we're experiencing, that's when thinking about all the pain that we are in, we can just end it by suicide. So stressful life events is a risk factor. And a risk factor is availability to lethal means of harm. It makes it easier for someone who has that impulsive urge to end their pain. It's right there. So that is a risk factor. There's also protective factors. Positive coping skills, being able to have the skills to manage the stressful situations we deal with in life. Reasons for living, having that sense of purpose, understanding what I'm here for, but how I can be a part of my community. And that's that feeling connected to others, having that sense of belonging with other people. Open communication around your thoughts or feelings, really having those conversations and being willing to talk to people. This is what I'm thinking, this is what my experience is, and being able to share that with others. Having a variety of positive relationships and other supportive systems. So being involved within your community and groups and organizations and things like that. Again, this goes along with that feeling connected. It's feeling connected with individuals within your community and groups and getting that overall sense of belonging and connectedness. Access to mental health or substance use care when needed. Being able to have access if you know that you're struggling. And the safe storage of potential means of suicide, such as firearms, weapons, medications, those types of things. Storing those safely within the home and out of immediate reach. Those are the different protective factors for suicide. Now, if you get to a point where you're seeing these signs, you're seeing these symptoms, and you're like, I really wonder if this is going on, this is how we look at assessing for that. Do they have thoughts of harm? Have you thought about hurting yourself or about death, suicide lately? Is this something that you're thinking about? Do you have a plan? What are the details of your plan? Do they have access what they need to carry out this plan? And what is your intent? How likely are they to carry out that plan? These are the things that we typically ask as mental health professionals to figure out, are they at that point where they're thinking of suicide and they are a risk to themselves? However, if you are ever worried about someone's safety, it is okay to get them help. Even if you're not quite sure, if you're ever concerned, if that crosses your mind that, hey, I really think that their safety is in danger, it's always okay to get them help. So if you're at that point and you're like, this person needs help, I need to help this person, it's telling the person you're worried for their safety and you stay with them, okay? You stay with them. You don't ask them to go to the hospital on their own. You bring the person to the emergency room or you call 911. You want to stay with that person and provide that support. And then when you get to that emergency room, a physician will evaluate and make those the decision on those next steps. So you put that care in their hands. But one of the biggest things is you do want to stay with that person to provide them that support and that care, knowing that you are there for them and you're helping make sure that they stay safe. And it's moving forward. How do we want to manage this long term? The big goal is to reduce the risk factors and strengthen the protector factors on a regular basis. We really want to focus on mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. We really want to be able to create some sort of balance. And you don't have to attack all of these at once because that gets overwhelming. Maybe just pick one and start improving on that one. Build problem-solving skills, coping skills, relationship skills, communication skills, working on being able to really express to other people your thoughts and your feelings, being able to manage that stress that you feel. And again, that community collaboration and that connection, being a part of community, being a part of something can really be a good protective factor. So some of the resources that we typically give out are the number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. This is a great resource. And if you have someone who's thinking about suicide, what you want to do is maybe, if it's possible, for you to be there with them when they call. Because what might often happens is you say, oh, I think you're suicidal, and then I'm just going to give you the number and expect them to call. They're not always going to call. So if you can be there with them when they call, that can be really helpful and supportive. There's also a suicide prevention text line, and that's texting home to 741-741. And I know with adolescents, though, they typically like to use this one a little bit better than the phone call. So I hope that this provided some information for you to help you identify any suicidality that might be happening in your loved ones and the steps that you can take to keep them safe. Thank you so much for watching this presentation, and I hope this information is helpful for you moving forward.